I want to talk about making custom GPTs, but I want to take a perspective that says, look, I'm working with a lot of these AI tools, but I don't work for any of these AI companies. I don't have a product to sell or any vested interest on any of this stuff. I mean, I'm working on a book, but I mean, that's different. In other words, I'm going to tell you what I really think. And there are some good things about these, and there are some not good things about these. And AI is unfortunately a field that is simply loaded with hype. Everybody promising the world. I'm going to restrict my comments to things that exist now. This is what you can do today, tomorrow. And if they change it all in a week or a month or a year, well, fine. But that's what I want to focus on, is what's available right away. Now, custom GPTs, first of all, by the way, I'm going to give the slides to the powers that be, and I've been busily trying to resize all my fonts so that hopefully you'll be able to see some of this stuff on these little monitors up here. This is my contact information. You'll be able to get all this from the slides. My name is Ken Kousen, as was mentioned. It's Kousen like the relative. It doesn't really look like it or anything. My one-person company is Kousen IT Incorporated, although my wife calls it Kousen It. It was her idea, So anyway, there's my email address, homepage, blog. I still have a Twitter handle, although I try to avoid the place. I'm on Mastodon on Fuji. That's Friends of OpenJDK. And, Blue Sky, whatever, all of those. I have a free weekly newsletter, comes out every Sunday, called Tales from the Jar Side, hosted on Substack, and I have a YouTube channel as well. Those are the books I've written. If you see that QR code, by the way, before you have to click on it, just letting you know, that takes you to the YouTube channel. So, all right, enough of that. Let's dive right in. When Sam Altman had his big keynote, a week before he actually got fired and then unfired and all of that chaos, he announced this GPT store. He referred to these things as GPTs, and unfortunately we all kind of went along with it. I did hear one person say that from now on they're going to refer to them as GPTs. But unfortunately, I tried to adopt that. It didn't catch on, but so be it. The idea is that you're taking a version of ChatGPT and customizing it for your purposes, and then making it available for everyone else to use, but only if they have a GPT Plus subscription or an enterprise subscription. Then there was this vague promise that coming soon was a GPT store, so that you could actually put your GPT in the store, and if enough people used it, there was going to be some revenue sharing deal. And I think it's been over a year now, and we're still kind of waiting. So I'll talk about the monetization problem later. Let me just say, no, don't worry about that. You don't do this for the money. However, there are some things it does really, really well. There are some things that custom GPTs make very easy for us, as opposed to coding it. Because that's one thing I do want to emphasize to you. This is what we classically would refer to as a no-code solution. This is where you're developing a system without being a developer. You're just writing prompts and writing questions and adding capabilities to it. If that didn't buy you anything, this wouldn't be worth doing. There are certain areas where this is helpful. I got to tell you, as a room full of developers, you will rapidly hit those limits as to what's practical to do. But let's try it out and we'll see. People say, oh, they're going to use it for virtual assistants or to automate repetitive tasks or even to shape the AI behavior. Yes and no. I mean, it's still an AI tool. There's still going to be it's still effectively having a will of its own, even though I don't want to accidentally personify these things, anthropomorphize them. But you can't really stop it from doing what these AI tools normally do. But we'll talk about that. So what they provided at OpenAI, because I'm focused here on the OpenAI system, is a GPT builder. And to give you an idea what this looks like, let me go to chat.openai.com, and that should jump right in. At any rate, when I get there, you'll see the classic image of GPT-4, where you've got a web page and it shows you what you can do and everything. While I wait for that to come in, let me show you a couple of pictures, and then that'll come in. When you start off making a GPT, you go to the, actually, let me tell you the basic steps, and then I'll show you the process, and hopefully we'll be able to do it together. And if none of that works, if I have internet issues or whatever, I have a couple that are already available, and hopefully that will come up. So let's keep our fingers crossed. I don't know why that's being flaky. What you start off with when you make a GPT is an interactive dialogue. It asks you questions, and then it customizes the GPT for you. One of the things it will do for you is to generate a little picture to go in the icon. It does that with DALL-E 3, you know, the image generator, text to image generator available inside it. Then it suggests some questions that you would ask, that you would provide for a user. What should a user do with this? What should they ask it? And they can click on those questions and everything. You get to customize those all you want. Those should be the questions that you are definitely ready to answer, the ones that you are idealizing on there. Okay, so this is a classic image of ChatGPT. If you have a subscription, this is what you get. Notice a little drop down. I'm on GPT-4 with DALL-E and browsing and all of that, and I can magnify this a lot, you know, and try to make it better. Over on the left here, these are GPTs that I have used before, the custom ones. The one that we're going to try to create in here together is this one, which I called GidsBot, G-I-D-S-B-O-T. In fact, if you're on ChatGPT, you can search on that. It is in the so-called GPT store. Just search on the name and it's there. And the goal of the GidsBot is to answer questions about the conference. And I'm going to show you how I created that and how I uploaded documents for it to search and put in actions for it to do and everything. But there's a link here called Explore GPTs. And if I click on Explore GPTs, then it should bring up, come on, you can do it. This is going to be a really tough talk if I can't show everybody the actual GPT on any of this stuff. Again, it was working when I was up there. All right, so this is the Explore page. Now, the Explore page has a bunch of ones that, again, I've magnified this, so normally you see it as a smaller table. It has a bunch of ones that they're featuring, which always, by the way, has its own group from ChatGPT itself. Things like the DALL-E image generator or some creative writing coach or what have you, and there's the DALL-E ones, etc. But over on the right, at the top here, there's this green button that says Create. So I'm going to click on that. And oh wow, hey, it's working. You did good. Okay. I have to be nice to Michael now. That's all right, I'll take it. Okay, so if you can see this a little bit, this button over here says Create, this one says Configure. I'm going to click on the Create button. It was on Configure because that's where I left it last time I went. And what it says is GPT Builder says, hi, I'll help you build a new GPT. You could say something like, make it creative, which I promise you I will never, ever say make it creative. You know, but at any rate, who helps generate visuals for new products, or make a software engineer who helps format my code. You need a software engineer to format your code. What would you like to make? Make a chatbot that answers questions about GIDS 2024, the conference being held in Bangalore, India. The website for the conference is developersummit.com. Okay, so what I'm doing, whenever you have a configured conversation with programmatically with a bot, there are what they call system messages, which set the overall context, and then there are user messages which you ask, and assistant messages which are the responses. When you have a conversation with a GPT, you're sending user messages, getting back assistant messages, and repeating that process in what they call a conversation. All of that fills what they call a context window. It's basically a RAM of an AI tool. Okay, so this thing came back with, next, let's decide on a name for your GPT. How about conference guide? Wow, that's terrible. Does that work for you, or do you have another name in mind? Let's go with it, because I'm not going to use it anyway. I'm going to go to the real one that I have. Sure, that's fine. And now it's going to offer to generate the icon for it. So it says generating a profile picture. It's going to give me a picture which generally doesn't look like anything and say, is this good enough? And I'll generally go, sure, why not? I mean, you could always try to change something later. You could always replace it. And here's the picture. And okay, it's got a little microphone in it. I have no idea what 138 means in this particular case, but it says, here's the profile picture for the conference guide GPT themed around a conference badge. Do you like it, or would you like any changes? That's fine. And now what this is doing is it's trying to set up that system message, the instructions that are not a question, just providing context for what the bot will use to answer your questions. Great. Now let's refine the context of how the GPT should behave. What specific details or features should it emphasize or avoid when answering questions about the conference? Use the conference website to answer questions about the schedule, location, registration, and speakers at the conference. And I'm hoping at the moment that it remembered the website I entered in there. If not, we'll fix it. But it's still generating all that. So it always says updating GPT. Great. And by the way, if you notice in the preview, it did in fact replace the icon with that little thing it generated. How would you like the GPT to respond if there's a request for information that isn't available on the conference website? Should it suggest alternative ways to find the information, or just inform the user that the information isn't available? This is one of the things where what you say and what will actually happen don't always line up. I could say, if you don't have an answer there, say you don't know, and yet it will half the time fall back on its own training and answer whatever it thinks. I'll say, I'll do that. Let's say, if you don't know the answer, say that. That's good enough. And now it's going to ask me, I believe, whether to give it a formal answer or warm and friendly, something trying to set the mood, if you will, inside there. Finally, how do you want the GPT to talk? Should it use a formal language or be a bit more casual? Let's be ridiculous and say, make the answers formal and official, right? What the heck? We're keeping people from voting. Let's get right in and, make it all official here. So it's updating the GPT, and I believe that may be about it. Okay, the Conference Guide GPT is now set up to provide formal and official answers about the GIDS 2020 conference in Bangalore. You can try it out in the preview on the right to see how it responds to your questions. If there's anything else you'd like to refine or change, just let me know. So in other words, they're trying to use a GPT to generate a GPT, and all the limitations that come with that. So if I'm going to try it out, I'm going to say, tell me about the conference. Just a real generic, general question, and see what it does. GIDS 2024 or the Great Indian, so can't show that to Dilip. Developer Summit is a prominent conference focusing on the latest trends, technologies, and practices in the software development industry. The event annually gathers experts, thought leaders, Michael, you're a thought leader, and professionals to share insights, innovative ideas, and network, on and on. Details such as the exact dates, venue, registration would be available on the official GIDS website. So where is the website? And hopefully it'll know that. And yes, it has it right there. You see, it's actually providing a link in there, which is quite useful. And I'll say, who are some of the speakers? See if Michael comes up. I mean, you get an assist. I currently don't have direct access to the latest information. Yes, of course it does. The lineup of speakers should typically include leaders from all over the world. So yeah, okay. And me, I'm here too. So, but at any rate, I don't know why it doesn't understand. All right, so you get the basic idea. That's not really the value added. I mean, that's just a dialogue with a chatbot, not a big deal. Where this starts to pay off is you go to the Configure tab. Now, in the Configure tab, now it's no more dialogue stuff. We just fill in things on our own. So again, we've got our icon at the top. We've got the name, which we could change now. So I'm going to change it to GIDS Conference Guide. And there's a description, answers questions about the GIDS 2024 conference. And this block called instructions. Again, it's hard to see. Let me magnify that a bit more. The instructions here has a summary of what I typed in before. But here I can actually emphasize, provides precise information about the conference website located at https developersummit.com, about the schedule, location, registration, and features, etc. Now, the thing that's a little misleading about this is it looks like we don't have a lot of room to type. When we take a quick look at AI assistants, the programmatic way they have this on the platform for OpenAI itself for coding, they tell you that the size of the input here is somewhere in the thousands of characters. You know, several thousand tokens. It may be as much as 5 or 10,000. In other words, there's way more room than it looks like it has. And there's a little button down here to let us maximize. And see, suddenly now I've got all this extra room, and I could add in additional information. You can download the speaker list, the schedule, and other information from the website. Something like that. And then I'll hit close, and it updates that information. So then the next step is what they call here conference starters. These are questions that you want to set up, because when somebody goes to your custom GPT, these are the 4 questions at the bottom, or however many you set up, that it's offering to solve for you. So this is what everybody's going to see. If you have, like, for example, if you want to offer a discount code, if you want to offer a coupon code for something you're selling, you'd say in there, what's a coupon code? And you would put that code in the instructions, for example. When I did my one for my keto book, I put in where is the GitHub repository with the source code? And I put that in. So here what they came up with is, what's the schedule for GIDS 2024? Can you tell me about the speakers? How do I register? What topics will be covered? Bears a remarkable resemblance to what I was using to test it, right? I'm going to go with those for the moment. Okay, now comes the fun part. Knowledge. If you upload files under knowledge, conversations with your GPT may include file contents. Files can be downloaded when Code Interpreter is enabled. If you haven't been to an AI talk that discussed RAG yet, you will during this conference, sooner or later. RAG, for those who are not aware, is Retrieval Augmented Generation. It answers the question that everybody asks. Everybody always says, how can I get my own data into the GPT? And they always say, well, use RAG. In fact, the ThoughtWorks radar, which just came out last week, put Retrieval Augmented Generation, RAG, in the adopt category. It was one of the few things under the tools, I think, that made it to that category. Let me give you my 2-minute rant. I'll rag on RAG, okay, if you will, a little bit. There's nothing wrong with RAG, don't get me wrong, and it is very, very useful. However, RAG was formulated when the context memory on most GPTs, or most AI tools, was about 2K, about 2,000 tokens. Now, if you're the ratio between tokens and words, you know, words in English or whatever, is 1,000 words. No, 750 words is about 1,000 tokens. So there's your rough idea. If you've got 1,000 tokens, 750 words, so 2K, 2,000 tokens wasn't a whole lot. If you're going to upload documents from your organization to the AI tool, that's going to use up that context window pretty quickly. So the real idea behind RAG is to say, okay, I tell you what, we're going to take your information and we're going to, quote, embed it as a vector in some high order space. We're going to come up with a set of doubles, a list of doubles that will characterize this information. And then we'll save all those vectors in a vector database, which is really good at searching them for similarities. So when a user asks a question, they'll encode the question, they'll embed that, coming up with the encoding, then ask the relational database, or pardon me, the vector database, which parts of the documents are closest to this? Which ones are similar? Grab that, put it in the context, and then ask the question. See, what you have not done is change any of the weights on the AI. The AI is what it is. You can't change the weights. That fine-tuning stuff they talk about, that may change the weights. We're not talking about that. That's expensive and not terribly reliable. There's a whole different set of issues with that. RAG is to find the parts of your documents that are the most similar to the question that was asked, so it can be added to the context and fit. And when GPT-3 came out, they raised the size of the context to like 4K, and everybody was excited. And when GPT-4 came out, then they raised it to 16K, and you could even pay extra and get 32K. Much better. And I thought, okay, you know, now things are getting pretty sizable. And then came Claude from Anthropic. Anybody use Claude? Yeah, I mean, a handful. It's a really good tool. Anthropic was created by some people who didn't want to stay at OpenAI. They left and formed their own company, and their flagship product is Claude. When Claude 2 came out, they raised the bar on the context window to 100,000 tokens on that. I mean, that's quite a leap, right? From 32K up to 100,000. At which point OpenAI said, oh, we got to find a way to match that. But then when Claude 3 came out, which was just a few months ago, now the context window was raised to 200,000 tokens. And that's a lot. I mean, that's not a library, but that's a fair number of documents. So, of course, then what happened, because right now I think the token size of the context window for GPT-4 is 128K. I think that's where they're sitting, although they say they can get to 200. Google finally, at long last, released Gemini 1.5. And Gemini 1.5 has 1 million tokens in the context window. Now, I have a book called, I did the Help Your Boss Help You one, which should have been called Managing Your Manager, but that title was taken. At any rate, that book, I have a PDF of that book. So what I did is I wrote a program that took a PDF reader and extracted the text out of it. Just Apache Tika reader, you know, the really simple one. Tika is a wonderful project, can read data from almost any source at all. I read the text, and it turned out my book is about 60 to 65,000 words, 150 pages. Well, that thing, it turned out in Gemini, you could submit a request and say, what if I put the whole book in the context window? How many tokens is that? And that came out to only about 80,000 tokens. Again, that 3/4 relationship kind of held right. So I put the whole freaking book in there and said, give me the 5 main points of the book, and it had no trouble doing that at all. Now, I gotta confess, that's an expensive way to solve that problem, because tokens are how these tools make money. There's a certain cost for input tokens, there's a certain cost for output tokens. If you're thinking of experimenting as a developer, let me assure you that you'll be fine. I mean, I could spend a week working with these things, like multiple hours a day, playing with it all the time, and I will have spent a nickel, a dime maybe, at most US. I'm not sure what that is in rupees, but you'll let me know. But it was not much. Where the cost adds up, well, let me put it to you this way. On the OpenAI website, they say that it costs $10 for 1 million tokens. Okay, so that's $1 per 100,000 tokens. And again, my book was about 80,000 tokens. So it's about 80 cents. You know, and that's if I want to put the whole book in the request. Now, if you're doing summarization, summarize the following document, that's really useful to put the whole document in there. But if you're doing just, chapter by chapter questions, or if you're looking for data or whatever, you don't want to have to put the book in every single request that you're submitting, because the way pardon me, the way these conversations work, you set the system information and you put in the user information and the last response and then the next user question and then the next response. It just keeps growing and growing. You have to have room in the context window for all of that. So bringing this back to vector databases and RAG and all of that, what RAG was there for was to fit all this data in the context window. Well, what do you do when the context window is 1 million tokens? Or, again, I don't want to speculate, but they say Google's working on one that has 10 million tokens in the context window. I mean, 1 million tokens, my one book in 80,000. I could put, what, 10 books, 15 books, something like that? It's starting to sound doable. Okay, on the other hand, as I say, that is an expensive way to solve the problem. Okay, you're putting everything in there every time. It's a good way, but it's pricey. So you don't want to do it on something you're going to ask over and over and over again. That's where the money will add up. But it can't be bad to have a searchable vector database where you have an algorithm that already knows how to find all the important parts really quickly and filter down that information to just the most similar answers to the question you're providing. I mean, that's still a good thing, right? And it would keep things down size-wise. So if you ever have to do, and I'm getting back to this upload files, by the way, we're coming back. If you ever have to do this programmatically, if you ever have to write code to do it, and I'll talk more about that, I think on either tomorrow or Thursday, I have a talk about that. You find out it's what I like to call a dangerously interesting algorithm. Dangerous because every person who learns it follows the steps and gets all excited and says, okay, I get this now, and then they want to tell everybody about it. So they all write a blog post or they make a video or they just bug their friends and have a lunch and learn and say, hey, look how this works, I can do this, when it's the same every time. We all get it, eventually. But it's one of those things that's more complicated than you can get on first glance, but certainly easy enough for you to get in an hour or an afternoon, whatever. You'll get it. The problem is, to do it programmatically, you have to pick a vector database. You have to pick an embedding scheme. That's the encoding part. You have to pick the similarity search algorithm. Oh, I'm using cosine search. Why? Because that's the one I have. Or whatever. You have to write all these steps and make decisions all along the way. Or there's a button right here that says upload files. That's it. I mean, they just say, oh, click, and then you just go to, here, I took the schedule for GIDS 2024, opened it up in my browser, did a print to PDF, and saved it. There's the schedule as a PDF. It is approximately 43 megs in size, and then I say open, and now it's loaded, and I didn't have to pick anything. See? RAG is way too complicated for what you get for it. It's so much, it could be and eventually will be so much simpler than what everybody describes. Now, on the other hand, I can't tune this at all. I can't pick the vector database, and there are pluses and minuses among all the different vendors. I can't get into details specifying the algorithm and the embedding scheme and the encoding and the search mechanism, any of that. But look how easy it was. Now, the rule with custom GPTs is you can upload, I believe it's 10 files, each of which has to be below a certain size limit. I think it's about 20 megs, I think, each. And there are some token limits involved as well. But once they're uploaded, it's in there. This is one of the reasons to do a custom GPT. Even if you don't plan to give it to anybody, if you're just doing it inside your own organization and enough people also have GPT Plus accounts, you could just upload the files. Now, other capabilities. Web browsing's already in there, and I do want that. DALL-E image generation, I don't really need it for this. I'm going to do it anyway. Code interpreter, again, I don't really need it for this. I'm going to do it anyway just to show you. And then we're going to come back to actions. Okay, that's another interesting one. Let me make that smaller again and hit... Oh, I didn't have to hit save. And now let me try asking about the schedule, right? So what are some talks from Wednesday's schedule at the conference? And what it should do, hopefully, is look at that guide I uploaded, and nope, it got Venkat's talk from this morning, Dan's from today, right? So I'm hoping the problem there is time zones, because I'm still getting adjusted myself. Maybe so is the GPT. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back. Yeah, again, that was my talk from today. Let me go back to my instructions. Michael, did you do that one today also? Yeah, that was your keynote, right? Yeah.
You were not there?
I was there. I was in the back working on my slides, but I was there. No, see, I also then go back to the instructions and say, for any schedule related questions, consult the uploaded PDF. See? And hopefully it will use that. See? You could add, I only added here those, the basic schedule, but I could download half pages from the website and upload them all individually. It's a question as to whether to let it browse the internet or not. You know, is that going to help? I mean, I told it where to go. Does that mean it'll do it? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But that's basically the bot. Now, I do want to talk to you about the actions. The problem with the actions, and before I do that, let me hit the create button. But then I'm going to go, this is what I want to show you. There is a publish. Well, it used to be a publish button. Now it's that create button that says share the GPT. Only me. It could just be something you use privately. Anyone with the link, now again, they have to have an account at GPT, or publish to the GPT store, and hey, maybe make a fortune. Yeah. And there's the icon and everything. I'll say anyone with a link at the moment, but what I want to do now is I want to talk to you about those actions. So what I'm going to do when it comes back is go into the editor again and show you what the actions are. What actions are for is for allowing it, there's the link, and then I could copy that and email it or post it on social media. Again, I'm not recommending you use this one. I'm going to show you the GIDS bot that I actually did do that has an action in it. What actions are for is to allow the AI to access an external API. It's not read a website or anything. It's, hey, I've got a programming model. It's on my homepage or my site or somewhere that I have hosted. Here is the description of the API. Now you can access it whenever you want. That's also an interesting thing to do, although I'll come back to it. So let me X out of that and go down to actions. Now, by the way, under additional settings, there's where they hid the use conversation data in your GPT to improve our models. See, this is the next question every company asks. Yeah, I wanted to interrogate our data, but I don't want to give my data to OpenAI to build the next generation of models. Okay, first of all, companies worry way too much about that. The data is not stored as data. It's used to adjust weights during a training process. They can't spit out your data back at you unless you are extremely persistent about asking extremely leading questions like, hey, there's a document called this, and here's the first paragraph. What's the second paragraph? And even then, it may not be able to do it. Also, the more common your data is, and I don't mean specific to your company, just if it's common type of information, everybody has financial data or whatever, then it's going to forget all the details. It's just going to train on the data, and you don't have to worry about it. Now, I know that's not a persuasive argument for the legal team. So be it. But the next question they say is they're going to use my data to train the model? How do we stop that? Here's where you stop that, at least in terms of those conversations. Now, what about the file I just uploaded? Is that going to be used to train the data? They say no. Let's look at reality for a minute. I mean, I don't have any evidence that they're lying, okay? I mean, they're probably not lying. I can promise you that according to their team of lawyers, according to the letter of the law, they'll do exactly what they say in the contract, okay? But here's the thing. Training each generation of models requires roughly 5 times the amount of data as the previous generation. And the internet is becoming more and more corrupted with auto-generated data, with things that aren't helpful for training anymore. And too many places are blocking their search bots. I mean, back when they were still building GPT-2, the whole web was available for downloading. They could grab whatever they wanted and nobody complained until after the fact. Now that's not so easy. In other words, there's a desperate need among these AI vendors for training data. A lot of training data. And if they say, no, we won't use your data, well, they won't. But will they find a way around that? Will they say, well, we're going to anonymize it first? Or will they say, I tell you what, we'll give you a discount if you let us use some of your data in a certain way? You know what I mean? There'll be offers because they need it. They're desperate for it. So we'll see how that plays out. I don't know anything specific along that line, but I don't know. It's hard to believe a market that desperate for data will be able to keep its hands off data you're deliberately uploading. Now, if you really want to keep your data away from them, then I always recommend Ollama, O-L-L-A-M-A. The Ollama system allows you to run AI models locally on your own machine. Nothing goes over the web. So nobody knows what you're asking it. None of the data is exposed. The price you're paying for that is that even though Ollama is free, you're paying for your own hardware. What am I running it on? And there's only so much RAM I could load up on a machine. You know what I mean? I've used the Llama 3 model that came out this week. Yeah, late last week, early this week. Meta, Facebook, released Llama 3. They have an 8 billion parameter model. That's the small one. I played with that. They have a 70 billion parameter model. That's pretty hefty. That would take up, I've got 64 gigs of RAM on this machine. That would probably bring it to its knees. I mean, that would be really hard on that. They're talking about releasing a 400 billion parameter model. I'd need a custom machine for that. See what I mean? If you're going to work with these huge models locally, you need the hardware. That's the price you're paying. If you're not, then you're paying the company to load it on their hardware. I think GPT-4 has 1.5 trillion parameters, something like that. It's a lot. It's a much, much bigger one. Okay, now about actions. I'm going to click on this create new action here, and it says, let your GPT retrieve information or take actions outside of ChatGPT. There's a learn more link which takes you to the help pages, and there's a box that says authentication. Now this is does the user of the GPT need to authenticate to work with the API? Okay, and usually the answer is none. No, they don't. You can say they need an API key. You can set up OAuth. The one I'm going to show you takes none. Okay, then it says schema. That's what it says here, schema. You could import it from a URL. What do they mean by schema? I imagine a lot of you have heard of Open API, not OpenAI, Open API, what we used to call Swagger. It's a way of documenting RESTful web services, basically. If your service publishes a Open API, again, I'm trying to figure out a way to say that, then they can import it. Otherwise, they say, put it here. And if you're like, I have no idea what to do here, then they say, oh, we have another GPT called the Actions GPT. And if you click on that, let me click on that, then it'll open up another custom GPT that says create a spec for this API, and what you do is you fill in all this information. And again, I've magnified so large it's hard to see it in here. And what you do is you go in and you say, oh, my API computes this sort of information, and here's the endpoint and stuff like that. Now I'm going to close this now, and in fact what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the one I've already done and show you an example here. So here is my GIDS bot. Okay, and under here, I'm going to select Edit GPT. And you see in here, I've got instructions that go on a little bit more. I've got some conversation ideas. Those are the questions. I only uploaded the schedule again. I was going to upload the speaker list and other stuff, and I thought, nah, I'm making the point here. But under actions, I have this special one. Now, what I did, I was trying to think, what can I do that would be cheap and free? And have you ever used the Open Weather Map API? Anybody ever used that one? If you're not aware of it, it's useful. Open Weather Map is, well, weather data that is relatively current. You pay for it if you want it to be current, and there's a lot of services they will offer you, but there's a really useful free tier. All you have to do is register and get a key. What I have done over here is I made a weather service inside of a Spring Boot app. So this is my weather controller that's going to access a weather service. Here's my weather service. Which has a key which I put in my resources, source main resources of my application.properties file. I'm assuming most people are familiar with Spring or Spring Boot. It's really hard to be a Java developer and not run into Spring at some point in your career. So I figured I'll make a quote. Should I call it a microservice? No, we're past the peak of inflated expectations on that, heading down to the trough of disillusionment. So I'll just say it's a service. Any rate, I made an interface which looks like this. So this is what they call an HTTP exchange interface in Spring Boot 3.1, which is Spring 6.1. Okay? Spring Boot 3.2, Spring 6.1. What it means is I have an interface with a method called getWeather. It takes a GET request, and this is the URL. That's not the base URL. That's the path that goes beyond the base URL. And then you substitute in a latitude and a longitude and a units and the app ID. That's the key you register for. Then what happens is these are all extracted from the URL, plugged in here, and Spring will automatically implement this using, where's my config file here, app config, using this REST client that I set up, which takes in the base URL and sets up the REST client, and then this is boilerplate code you get right from the Spring Boot documentation that tells Spring, implement that interface for me, and we're done. Now, in the actual service, I only have that one method called getWeather. It takes a latitude and longitude, and it calls that method on the interface with a lat and a longitude. And believe it or not, the temperature it wants to return is in Kelvin, which I don't have a use case for Kelvin. If I say metric, then you'll see Celsius. If I think I say imperial, you get Fahrenheit, but I will not subject you to imperial units in here. That would be cruel. And there's my app ID. Now, the nice thing about IntelliJ here is that if I go to my controller, here's the controller where I auto-wired in that service, and now I have a simple get method, a get mapping to /weather that has a method and says format the response to, and you see here, to make life easy, I automatically just put in, I hard-coded in the latitude and longitude for Bangalore. Okay, as reported by Google. I didn't necessarily have to do that. This is an AI bot. I could just say it's Bangalore and it may figure it out, but it also may not. You know, I've seen some wildly wrong things on that. Now, I also put in this little formatting method. So this is a text block, okay, the multi-line string in Java. And I put in the weather for name and country as of time, and they return a Unix time. So I put in a method to convert that to a date time, local date time. And then what did I put in here? Temperature is, humidity is, high of, and low of. And I built all that. And there's the little private method to convert to a local date time. Okay, but now if you're in IntelliJ, you know how you always get that little planet in the little mapping elements, the get mapping or the post mapping, whatever? Well, if you hit the drop down next to that, one of the options is generate OpenAPI draft. And it will open it up, and if I look at it in, let me move that preview out. But anyway, you don't even need to see it. You see here is the OpenAPI spec right in there. You can almost tell Can I resize that? Yes, I can. So there's a description, there's the server, which is wrong, and then there's the method, the /weather does a get request, and to get weather, response for a 200 is an OK, and the schema is a type string. That's all we're getting back is a string. And Spring generated that for me. If they didn't, and when I first did this, they didn't, I went and used that assistance API, the one that they offered, and I just told it what I wanted and what the typical response looked like, and it generated it all for me. And if you look in here in this action, that's what I have pasted in. That's Open API. Now, what I had to do is I had to make that Spring Boot app available, deployed somewhere. I had to deploy it. What I eventually wound up doing, because I'm much better at the dev part than I am at the ops part, what I eventually did is I just deployed the whole Spring Boot app to Heroku. And the Heroku URL is Bangalore weather some auto-generated string.herokuapp.com, and the rest of it is exactly what you saw, except it is pointing out the content coming back is text/plain, and there it is. So it's all working in there. So what I can now do, if I don't want to edit the action now, is I can ask my GIDS bot, what is the weather forecast for the conference? And hopefully it will go there, but it may ask me for permission. I don't think it asks anybody but me. Yeah, it says GIDSBot wants to talk to, and it's giving me the URL of where I have it set to deploy. Again, once I put it in the GPT store, it won't ask anymore. So I'll just say allow. I could have said always allow, but I wanted to show you that. So if I say allow, now it's actually going to access that site. And what a lot of companies are doing with their custom GPTs is they're putting an API on their own site to get user information or to provide documents or whatever else you want to expose through an API. The current weather in Bengaluru is mostly clear with a few clouds. The temperature is around 34.4 C, humidity of 22%. Today's temperature is expected to range between a high of 35.85 and a low of 33. That sounds about right, actually. So, and that's the sort of information you can get out of Open Weather Map. See, work like a charm. Now, I could add lots of other actions as well. However, when I scroll down, there's a field that didn't get to see. Is it under additional settings? Okay, it's not showing me on this. On the actions page, when you add an action, you have to add a privacy policy. It wants a URL for a deployed privacy policy. And I'm like, I'm not collecting any data from anybody. What do I need a privacy policy for? I need it because they won't let me publish it without one. So I looked around, I found a template for a privacy policy that was as generic and simple as I could get. I put it on my own Kousen IT website under /privacypolicy.txt, entered it in here, and then it let me publish it. Okay? And now I have a GIDS bot, and I sent it to Dilip and said, try it out, or I let Dan try it out. It works and it doesn't work, I mean, like you say, well, let me ask it. Tell me about tomorrow's talks. I have no idea what it's going to come up with that. It may use the information I've uploaded. It may use the website. Searching my knowledge is a very good clue that it's using the information you provided. Tomorrow, the date starts with registration, and okay, went right to the schedule stuff. Here's some notable talks. Back to Venkat again. We're on the No Fluff Just Stuff tour together. One thing you learn on the tour is you do not compare yourself to Venkat Subramaniam on any scale whatsoever, except maybe height. Yeah. At any rate, that's the same keynote from today. So it looks like we're still, I'm guessing the problem we're having here is a time zone issue. That it thinks it's, where is OpenAI? Silicon Valley, so it's probably still today for them, it doesn't get it yet. But it's still an AI bot, okay? I can say something like, let's see, render a picture of a Julius set for mathematics, okay? Now remember I included the code interpreter? It is now generating Python code to generate a Julius set, which is a fractal, and then it'll use whatever its image generation mechanism for that to make a picture, and that has nothing to do with anything I want to do, right? It has nothing to do with GidsBot. Now, I could have disabled the code interpreter, but then there'd be a cost to that. What if I asked it for, all sorts of random questions. Tomorrow in the keynote, I'm going to put up some chatbot horror stories, what kind of things that it has done in the past. Yeah, there's a picture of a Julius set. Thanks, GidsBot. What are you doing, But that's the sort of thing that happens. You can ask it anything you want. If you go to somebody's website and they say, oh, talk to our AI assistant, ask it something completely and totally unrelated and see what it does. They try to put guardrails on these things. Does it work? Not necessarily. You can try. That's really hard. Remember, this thing was trained on trillions of bits of information. All right, now with that in mind, let me go back to the slides here. I uploaded the files, I enabled the code interpreter, I published a link, and did some integration with an external API. You start at ChatGPT, you click the Explore GPTs button, you click on Create, you answer the dialog questions, use the Configure tab. Again, all this is going to be in the slides that I'm going to give to Dilip or whoever, so you'll have all this. It is 10 files per GPT. Text, of course, spreadsheets, presentations, I suppose I haven't tried that. Images, there's limits on the size of all these things, and they all have a cost to them. I enabled all those capabilities. Okay, and then I talk about actions a little bit, and there's a whole set of frequently asked questions that you might take a look at. So let me skip that and the publishing, and now, these are, sometimes you get the feeling these are toys. Again, that's no code. I wrote code to make the API that I exposed to it, but say you borrowed an API from somewhere else, or you had a different team write the API. This is something that anybody can put together with a little bit of training. It can even be incorporated into your own coding, but no. The GPT is restricted to people who have the premium or the GPT Pro account or the enterprise account. Everybody, they're the only people who can get access to it, and they do it through the web browser. It's not something you could download and make a part of your own system. Well, what can you download and make a part of your own system? That's when you go to platform.api. Oh, I think I closed it. So, oh no, it's right here. Sorry. This is at platform.openai.com, where you can actually access these things programmatically, and they have a whole section here called Assistance API. And you can see how they work, and you create a thread and you add messages to it and you run the assistant and you get all this information back, and it's got a RESTful web service. And I was sitting here thinking, I'm going to implement this, and then I came to my senses, because there are frameworks already that kind of already do this. And why reinvent the flat tire, which is what I call when you reinvent the wheel and you get it wrong, This is okay, and they got a lot of information here. Now, what I did do is I went into their playground, and in the playground, I uploaded my book. See, there's my, it gets started. So, oh, I must not be logged in. All right, well, at any rate, you could see in here that if I accessed one I already had, there's a system message, you're a helpful assistant specializing in analyzing financial data or whatever. Then there's a user message, and then you click go, and it gives you an answer, and you could add it as an assistant message and go on and on. This is your playground as a chance to try it out. Okay, with that in mind, this is the thing that you could add to your own system. That's yours to control. It's all a RESTful web service again, so it's still hosted on OpenAI. Okay, it's all hosted as part of their site. Again, if you need this thing to be local, write your own code, which I'll talk about tomorrow. Let's see. So again, make a thread, add your messages, run the assistant. Some limitations. They still come up with these so-called hallucinations. They will make up answers. I argue that you should treat every AI model as an enthusiastic toddler who's dying to please you. And therefore, they'll say anything that will please you, whether it has any real connection to reality or not. right? Because they don't know what reality is and they don't care what reality is. They know that they like the answer, that you were happy about an answer, and that's all they want. That's why they're so easy to break some of the guardrails you make, because you just have to be persistent in saying, okay, let me ask the same question a different way, or I want to ask this, and I really need this, or here, it's worth an extra $1 if you'll answer that. I mean, it responds to that. Or if you give me a bad answer to this poor bunny over here will suffer. You know, it's like, oh my goodness, are you going to say that? But people will do this, and it'll break down their barriers very easily, a lot of times. Okay, so, all right, what about the money? Right? Hey, this is all supposed to go in a GPT store? Well, I'll start with that answer, you know, LOL. And then you say, but I thought there was a GPT store. Well, yeah, okay, good luck with that. I mean, it was announced at that keynote, and they do have something like it. As they say on the webpage, there's a frequently asked question list about it. It says, we've partnered with a small group of builders to test usage-based GPT earnings. First thing to notice is you're not in that small group of builders, okay? And you're not going to be in that small group of builders. The rich get richer here too, you know? This is really, and if it's usage-based, then the ones that get millions of accesses are going to get all the money, and everybody else is going to get zero. Okay, so if you hope to be one of these people who breaks through, well, you know, you can play the lottery too. Both have about the same chance of eventually paying off, you know. Okay, well, how do I get admitted to that small group of users? Yeah, oh, you sweet summer child. Yeah, I mean, it's not happening. If it does happen, please let me know. I'd love to hear I was wrong about this. Okay, but I will believe it when I see it. Now, the thing is, I don't think any of those creators are getting any money either. I think it's all in beta. I think they're just still experimenting. There is a link here on monetizing your GPT and the fact, but it's very little information, and it basically is saying, yeah, don't expect to happen. So, because there's basic questions like how much and how many users, how's it going to work? And it's like, yeah, we're not even going to answer that. You know, they won't even give you an answer on any of this. In other words, you're not making any money from these things. I mean, if you are, again, I'd love to be proven wrong, but don't do this for the money. Let's say it that way. If you're going to do it, then don't expect the money. Well, what are you doing it for? First of all, you saw, I put that together in 20 minutes if you don't count all the time I spent talking to you about it. It was nothing. Putting together the GID spot, it took me a little longer because I'd never done an action before. I had to work out the code. I had to publish it. Frankly, publishing to Heroku was the hardest part of that whole process for me. And if you're a good DevOps person, it'd be easy for you. It is also by far the easiest way to add your own data to an AI bot. That was easy. You know, click on the upload files button and you're done. That was really good. Also, you can make your GPT available to anyone with the link or make it public as long as you use their store and they have a premium account. The actions start to move you into programming, which looks good, but if you're going to program, why not write code and use the Assistance API, or even use one of the wonderful frameworks like LangChain for J or Spring AI. They're both pre-version 1.0, but they're both coming, and they're both very, very good. That will do all this for you and help out a lot on that. So let me make some conclusions on this. By the way, I do have a playlist on my YouTube channel about AI-related things. Again, it's just youtube.com/@talesfromthejarside, you know. And they are quick and easy to use. If you're not doing it for the money, if you're doing it to just enter in a bunch of data and share it within your team, you know, that's an easy way to do it. Don't expect them to be better than the underlying AI. I mean, the more you play with the AIs, the more you learn what their pluses and minuses are, what their limitations are. Upload your own data, but it may answer using that data, it may not. You know, you have to push it a little bit. If you prefer to code, then code. This is a no-code, easy solution to an interesting problem. It's kind of fun the first couple of times. And I mean, honestly, it took me 20 minutes to put that GID spot together, other than the uploading of the files and adding in the assistants, you know, and that's all I have left. I mean, there's just not much more they can do, frankly. The rest of it would get, if I had to do much more sophisticated than that, I got to go code. Okay, I got to write the code there. So that's the message. Now, one last thing. I called this talk, you know, fun and profit and potential liability. I'll tell you some horror stories tomorrow during the talk, but let me just remind you, you don't want to take an AI tool and expose it as a chatbot on your website and just let it run wild. That's what happened to Canada Air a few months ago, if you heard that story, where there was a poor guy in Chicago and he had to get a bereavement flight. His grandmother passed away and he wanted to go attend the funeral. And of course, he went to the Canada Air site and they pushed him toward the chatbot. So he said, can I take the flight and get reimbursed afterwards for the bereavement flight like that, get the money back? And eager to please, it said, yes, absolutely. And then he goes and takes the flight and tries to get reimbursed. And Canada Air says, no, you can't get reimbursed for that. That's not our policy. He's like, but your chatbot said it was. And he's like, and Canada Air was like, that we're not responsible for that. That's not ours. That went to court over money that didn't even cover the filings for the lawyers involved, And he won, of course. I mean, the judge laughed them out of the building. If you brand it, you bought it. Okay, that's the message I have on these things. Would you use this GIDS bot? Sure, there's no money involved. If it's wrong, you look it up, Does it help any? Sometimes. Again, it was easy for what I made it for. It worked out well. Hey, I got a talk out of it. I've seen Venkat get talks for less, So there you go. So I hope you enjoyed that. Again, the slides will be available in the proceedings. Thank you very much for coming.